Thank you. Now, last speaker on the panel is David Denker, who is a senior associate for government relations in the Israel office of the Jewish Federation of North America. In this role, he represents the Israel Action Network, which our sponsors here in Israel. Prior to joining it, he was a counselor at the Ein Prat Academy for Leadership in Alon, Israel, and he has a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service and International Security Studies from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. So David will talk about what happens on the campus.
Thank you. This has been depressing. I'm going to talk a little bit about what on the ground and why I think most of me and my colleagues are actually a bit optimistic, because there is something to do in terms of organizing against what we see on campuses and also just beyond campuses in North America. First of all, it's a real honor to be here on this panel with so many distinguished professors. And it's a real privilege to represent IAN here in Israel. As was said earlier, the Israel Action Network is a joint project of the Jewish Federations of North America and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which respectively represent 500 Jewish communities throughout North America, 153 Jewish federations, 125 local community relations councils, and work in very, very close partnership with many other Jewish organizations, most of whom have three-letter acronyms, and including Hillel, Hillel International on campuses, who has done an incredible job of creating inclusive conversations on campuses across North America and throughout the world. And we are very, very proud of that partnership. And I think, Professor Golan, I think you would be more than welcome on all North American college campuses and in their Hillel houses.
Except not Hillel.
Not Hillel.
Thank you.
The Hillel guidelines are very clear, and you certainly fit within those guidelines in terms of not delegitimizing the existence of the state of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. As we heard, the campaign to delegitimize Israel is really a campaign about hearts and minds, about poisoning the discussion around Israel, painting Israel as a pariah state. And that's worrisome. Even though decades of polling have shown U.S. public opinion remains strongly pro-Israel, we've clearly seen why there is concern. And we even see in polling that among younger populations, and in populations in certain areas, such as those identified with the progressive left, minority groups, labor unions, churches, and campuses, that there is significantly less support for Israel. We are concerned that BDS activities are increasing, the doubling of anti-Israel activities on campuses at the end of the summer. And as we heard, also campuses are crucial, and that's why it's so crucial to the American Jewish community as we hope to support Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. The challenge demands a new approach, and I hope to convince an Israeli audience why we believe that this demands a new approach to explaining Israel and Israel advocacy that is really aimed to drive a wedge between the small percentage of people who are, as Cary said earlier, are hopeless, and those people who may be sympathetic to the language of the delegitimization movement and BDS tactics. Most Israel advocacy efforts are inherently reactive. They use echo chamber messages. They lack effective messenger infrastructure. And the efforts are often siloed within a specific constituency or a community or a campus. They fail to leverage assets from other arenas. Our philosophy is that in order to organize the ground game against delegitimization on campuses and in other forums, is really you have to really perfect working on four simple elements: the message, the messenger, the strategy, and a network. The message, the messenger, the strategy, and a network. First, messages must resonate with the audience and create a personal and emotional connection. Many advocacy approaches, and especially what we hear in Israel, rely on the kind of high school debate format. Advocates are expected to bludgeon the other side with facts and portray the Arab-Israeli conflict in black and white terms. And these messages are often quite appealing to those in the pro-Israel camp. But they just don't reach into the mind of those who are trying to reach. We've done many focus groups. Many researchers have done messaging research on what messages work, what messages reach the intended audience. And it's important to use the proper messaging and to really be thoughtful about it. Additionally, it's very important that this is about a personal story and about developing personal connections. Just for an example, in the Modern Language Association back in January, we saw that facts rarely matter, that in panels, discussions at the at the conference. The claims in one of the resolutions were entirely debunked. There were 5 claims, and all 5 of them were debunked about issues of travel within Israel. They were all debunked, but the scholars there said, no, facts don't matter. In this case, we have to send a message. And the only way to get through to people that hold these views is to hold a personal connection to them, to hold a personal friendship and say, no, this issue is important to me. This is why it should be important to you, and why what you're doing is possibly wrong. And that brings us to the second point, that you have to have the right messengers to deliver the message. As I said, we spend a lot of time on resources and on focus groups, but these aren't worth pennies if they're not delivered by the right person. And messages only carry credibility and are persuasive when they are given with the person who wears the same glasses as their audience. And so IN does not have that. The organized Jewish community does not have that. The state of Israel certainly does not have that, unfortunately. And so that's why we support our allies in organizations like the MLA, who are able to reach their colleagues. And this is why the book that Gabe and Cary edited is so important in the fight on campuses. They speak the language of the academy. And it's a crucial, crucial tool of the book. Third, you have to be organized. Many advocacy organizations and the Jewish world suffer from what we call programitis. Everyone wants to run a program, wants to bring a trip, wants to bring a mission, hold a conference, training sessions. And those things are all very, very important and each hold their place, but without an organized strategy and a clear outlining of where the goals are and where are the key areas of the key turning points, we're not going to make any move on in any of these areas. And so we need to focus on the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of organizing political campaigns. That means exploring their opposition, mapping the organizations that they're operating in, such as academic associations and on campuses, who is influential, who has access, and we have to reach our allies who are active in those organizations. We need to know a lot of people, and to be simple, we must be connected to their communities. And so that's why it brings us to our fourth point, why the use of a network is so crucial. The federations and the JCRCs realize that we have a network in North America. The federations are strong in their communities. The JCRCs have strong relationships with the non-Jewish communities. And so we realize that we can utilize this network if they're well organized and develop well-thought-out campaigns. We can leverage the assets that already exist in the community to reach the key people in the academic associations, on campuses, and in unions. To give a metaphor for our Israeli audience, we see ourselves as kind of tomchei lechima, as the people who support and develop the infrastructure behind many of these campaigns. And we rely on our allies, who are the real credible messengers, to carry them out. I brought here with me a document we produced last year. It's a little bit outdated. We're producing a new one over the last coming year. Best practices that we saw over the last few years of countering the assaults on Israel's legitimacy in a number of academic and professional associations. And just to briefly go over one successful campaign that many of the people in this room were involved in was the success of the American Public Health Association at the beginning of this year. At the end of 2013, we heard that there was going to be a movement from this professional association of public health officials to calling for a divestment from Israel. It's a major, major organization in America with 25,000 members. If it had passed, it would have been influential. We helped support our allies within the APHA to organize an effort over 7 months, using a core group of leaders and organizers from within the community who hold the maximum credibility. And we really helped them build from the ground up a campaign. We were able to garner signatures from 40 of the most influential APHA leaders from within the organization, including the deans of the faculty at Harvard Medical School. But we have to be sensitive to the organization. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to do proper research. And this takes a lot of time and energy, and to be smart. And in conclusion, the motion was defeated 75% to 25%. But that depended on a very, very long and intensive and very courageous effort by our allies and also the organizers within the Israel Action Network. I want to reiterate, the campaign here is about hearts and minds. It's not the BDS tactics used by the movement to delegitimize Israel are not about individual resolutions or individual efforts. It's about changing the discussion, and BDS wants to create controversy. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful not to give them too much credit, not to give them too much publicity. But also, it's very important that we provide constructive paths for engagement. So while we have the message, the messengers, the strategy, and the network, we also have to think about providing constructive paths for engagement with Israel, with the Arab-Israeli conflict, with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in order to really strengthen the pro-Israel community. Thank you.